Hello there, everybody, and welcome to Things We Said Today, our weekly virtual roundtable where we discuss all matter of things related to the Beatles, their present, their past, their future, and whatever else we can come up with. I'm Al Sussman from Beatle Fan Magazine, and I'm here with my three co-hosts. First of all, the host of the syndicated Beatles radio show Every Little Thing. That's Ken Michaels. Hey, Ken.
Hey, Al. How you doing?
Good. How about you?
Very good, thanks.
Good. And next,
he actually sounds normal this week.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
I always sound abnormal, right?
Right.
Abby normal.
Abby normal. In fact, I thought I was coming down with the same thing over the weekend, but I shook it.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately.
Good for you.
Yeah. And next we have, I think Alan Kozin called him the world's only remaining full-time Beatles journalist. He writes for Billboard and also for AXS.com and various other places, and that's Steve Marinucci. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Al. Hello, everyone.
And our the aforementioned resident musicologist, the author of a couple of Beatles books, and a longtime contributor to a longtime classical music reviewer for the New York Times, and still does work every once in a while for the Times and for various other places, and that's Alan Kozin. Hi, Alan.
Hey, Al, and hello, everyone.
Well, we're going to discuss a couple of things today.
Wait, what about me?
Oh, I'm sorry. We're even now.
There's a women always being left out.
Oh, no!
And I'm no longer referring to her as a guest, because she really is more of a kind of a recurring contributor to Things We Said Today, and that's the author of Songs We Were Singing, and also Michael Jackson FAQ, and for 20 years, Beatle Fans internet editor, and that's Kit O'Toole. Hey, Kit.
Hey, Al. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks for reminding me you were there.
Reminding you like
Another Billy Preston
We
moment.
forgot Billy Preston again.
Yeah, I'm the Billy Preston of this group.
Exactly. Last week I was Billy Preston.
Yeah. Oh.
So, as I said, we're going to discuss a couple of things this week. One is take a look at an old, kind of somewhat neglected album from the solo Beatles catalog. But first, have one little piece of current business to take care of, and that's an interview that appeared on the website Super Deluxe Edition within the last week or so. Well, a sort of interview with Scott Roger, who, according to the piece, manages, quote unquote, manages Paul McCartney and other major artists, including Arcade Fire, and who supposedly reached out to Super Deluxe Edition for an interview that for which he did not want to be directly quoted, which is a little strange. So actually, I think we should have Steve kind of interpret this.
Oh, you should have. I don't even have it up on my screen here. Hang on just a minute.
And if not, I believe Ken does.
Yes, I do. When I read this interview, there were just a few things I took away from it, because as we know, there's this big controversy about the bonus tracks from Flowers in the Dirt and the fact that it's being made available as a download only instead of on CD. And a lot of fans are very upset about that. So this is something that was addressed in this interview, as well as some other questions that I thought were not softball questions. Very, very good questions, as a matter of fact. But
sure.
I thought maybe I would just read the answer, although he did say, don't quote me word for word here.
Exactly.
the question, why not include the download-only content on a physical fourth CD in the Flowers in the Dirt box set? So what he says here is, the main reason why there is not a fourth physical CD is because Paul didn't want any more than 4 discs in the set. What Paul says ultimately goes. He wants to look into the future and embrace new technology and drive people to streaming. 100 million people are signed up to streaming services right now, and that is projected to double in the next 3 to 4 years. This is seen as the future. Paul's team wants to look to the future, and their research shows that more people are excited about the streaming catalog. If that wasn't the case, then many more box sets would be sold. That's the end of the quote.
Interesting.
Yeah. In fact, maybe reading more into it than is actually there, I have a suspicion that in the future, because obviously there's still 4 McCartney albums from the 70s, 4 Wings albums, Wildlife, Red Rose Speedway, London Town, and Back to the Egg, which still have not gotten the archive treatment. I have a nagging feeling that reading those comments that in the future what may happen is that the only physical content on these sets may be, besides whatever books and all are included, may be just the main CD, and the rest of the supplemental material may not only be not downloaded but available only through streaming.
That's possible.
Yep.
I certainly hope not.
Yeah.
I hope not, too. I have a feeling, though, if you want to read between the lines when he says, if this were not the case, that more people are interested in streaming, which, by the way, I don't know what their research is and what their research regarding McCartney's particular listeners is, but I have a hard time believing that most of those people are increasingly interested in streaming. But when he says, if that were not the case, more box sets would be sold, is basically what he's saying is we're not selling that many of these things. And that's probably also why he doesn't want to be quoted directly, because Paul doesn't like other people speaking for him. Right. I ran into that when I wrote about the Russian album, for the Times when it first came out. We were trying to get an interview with Paul about the album and why he did it, and he was working on Flowers in the Dirt, and Richard Ogden, his manager at the time, said he couldn't do an interview quite yet, but, eventually. And I said, well, why don't we talk if he's busy? And so Ogden and I had a conversation about a number of things, including why he did that album, and all about Glasnost, and the whole story. And while I was at it, I said, so by the way, why is it that he is putting out all of these singles with B-sides that are available only in Japan, or you've got to buy 5 different versions of the single to get all the B-sides? It gets kind of expensive. And Ogden's response was, you sound more like a fan than a New York Times critic, so what's going on? And I'm saying, well, are you saying that a New York Times reporter should not know his subject inside and out? Is that what you're saying? And basically, in the end, we went back and forth for several days, and finally my editor said, well, you know what, just write the damn story. Forget it. If he doesn't want to talk, he doesn't. So I wrote the story, and I had all these comments from Ogden, none of which were off the record. And because I quoted Ogden and not Paul, apparently there was quite a number that went on, because Paul doesn't want someone speaking for him, and Ogden was in the embarrassing position of having spoken for him. So he sent me an angry fax telling me that the comments were understood to be off the record. And I said that for them to have been off the record, that phrase must be uttered aloud. And in fact, it must be said before you make the comments. And we never, ever discussed off the recordness. It just wasn't. So I have a feeling that when this guy is saying, this isn't an interview and he doesn't want to be quoted,
yeah,
it's partly because of that, and especially because of he's going to be saying things like, well, if this were true, more box sets would be sold. It kind of is not something he probably wanted to be quoted saying.
Mm-hmm.
See what I mean?
Very possibly.
Yeah.
Very possibly. And
the other thing is is the resistance to streaming. The whole, look how long it took them to get to iTunes, although McCartney was doing digital before the Beatles were, but but it's still, that it just doesn't make sense. I don't know what especially if his fans, which are basically older fans, are more are happier with CDs. I don't see what the problem is. I don't understand. And again, as I said before we started, he had room on the set to put those tracks.
Yeah.
There's no reason not to. Absolutely none.
Right.
You can make all the excuses you want to, but that sticks out like a sore thumb.
And to say that Paul McCartney wants to, quote, drive people to streaming, does that sound true to any of you?
Well,
not if you have room for CDs.
No.
Not if you have room for the tracks. It sure as hell doesn't.
No.
If this thing was overloaded, that would be a different story. But it's not. It's not as Paul's reissues usually aren't. This one has a little more than most. We've talked about the issues with the reissues before, not having very many rare tracks. This one has a few more, but still, he could have done. Look at what Dylan did. Look at what the Beach Boys have done. I was just talking about the Allman Brothers with the 1971 Fillmore East concert. They just released the whole thing. Was it 6 CDs worth? Or actually that came out last year, but still, that's out there. McCartney's not doing, you can't say he's being charitable. I'm sorry, you can't.
On the one hand, this is admitting that these box sets are not selling well.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can look at it this way. He doesn't have to put this stuff out at all. And why should he if it's not selling well? So I think he's doing this because he still wants to do this. He wants to do this for the limited fans that care enough, that want the bonus material, and who actually care about all the photos that come with it, all the booklets that come with these archival releases are really nice. So he's continuing doing this despite the fact that there's a limited amount of interest in it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how he handles it. And just to address what you just said, Steve, there's a question here, and this is why I like this interview, because like I said, there's some tough questions here. I think everything is addressed in this interview that any McCartney fan who's bothered by all this would want the answers for. And the question is, if there isn't a market for multi-disc sets, how come Sony issued a 60-disc box set for Elvis and a 36-disc set for Bob Dylan? So the answer here is this is a different prospect. Scott agreed, the manager, that there probably is a market for a 25 CD set of Paul McCartney and Wings, and MPL could do that. Indeed, they are talking about it. But for one title, one album, it's different. And that was the response to that.
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. This whole thing about talking around the interview and everything like that, it just doesn't make sense to me at all. Just doesn't. As a journalist, I don't appreciate that.
Well, let me ask the internet editor here, and who is also in a younger demographic, because obviously there's as you know, there's a lot of opposition to downloading, let alone streaming among a large section of the Paul McCartney constituency, which is an older demographic, as they say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the future really these days, would you agree, is really even more so than downloading, is in streaming.
I think so. I mean, with people my age and definitely younger, they are very comfortable, with certainly downloading, but particularly streaming, because, they're not listening to their music, I'm really on stereos anymore. It's all, through the phone, through, maybe your computer, but mainly, phones, or if you have the, Spotify in your car or something. And they like being able to store their music, in the cloud, so they can access it anytime they want. And that's been very important, I think, to younger generations. And so probably people like that are not going to be bothered by having to, only get it on the stream or downloading it. And in fact, I was going to say earlier, Al, when you were saying you suspect that future archive releases could be, strictly online. Certainly that would be in a way attractive to Paul, because let's face it, a lot cheaper to do that than to actually have to produce.
It is.
I know we all love it, but I'm just saying, if you're just looking at it from strictly a business standpoint, much easier and cheaper to put it out that way than have to put out a physical product, So, I think probably younger, quotes, younger fans won't really be bothered by this, by downloading or streaming. But I definitely see with the Case of Flowers in the Dirt, with this price tag, that's on it, I can see why there is, there's this issue of why does some of it have to be downloads? As I said, with that price tag. If it didn't have that price tag, it wouldn't bother me as much.
And actually, the price tag went down. I don't know if you noticed.
Oh no, I didn't see that.
It was $149 before, and now I believe it's $119.
Yeah.
If you go on Amazon.
Yeah,
really?
That's still not super cheap, So, but that's a little better. That's true. But maybe they finally realized that they had priced it a little high. I don't know, but I can definitely see, like Steve, I can see your point. That there should be. It shouldn't be all downloads, or it's not all downloads, but it shouldn't be that many. That it should be more CDs for that kind of a price tag.
Yeah, especially if there's room on there, fine. There's no need to put people out, to do the downloads. It just doesn't make sense.
And like we've been saying, you can most likely fit all 18 demos on one CD. So if he's concerned about only putting out 4 discs, you can still do that.
Yeah.
My main concern, and I expressed this before when we first heard about this, is that you're giving all this bonus material lower status than the demos of Paul and Elvis. And there are a lot of people that love all this extra stuff that came out at that time. There are people who love these songs that came out. And, to say, well, we'll just put it out as downloads, it's kind of like saying it's not as important as the demos. And that's how I feel. Not only that, but there was a response that I got online on my Facebook page. One of my friends said to me that, I can download these songs and I can put them onto CD, but a CDR is not going to last as long.
Exactly.
As a recorded CD.
That's very true.
And that's really the major argument, is that you can take the time and do that. But I've had stuff on CDRs that has died.
I have CDRs that I recorded 10 or 15 years ago that will not play now.
Well, I have company made CDs that have gone bad too, so it's nothing is guaranteed. There was this situation called bronzing that happened for a while, depending on the kind of ink whatever record company was using.
Oh, right.
And it affected RCA. It affected certain British labels, and some of those CDs are not playable now. So I don't know. And I've had less problem with CDRs than with those. I mean, the only CDRs I've had go bad have been because I put labels on them.
Yeah.
Before,
oh, really?
Yeah,
Really?
because the labels, certain label adhesive material would start to shrink, and it would, pull.
They wrinkle.
It would pull on the CD. It would pull the data layer off, and
right.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I
never heard of that one.
Oh yeah.
I remember. Either posting or seeing something about it a few years ago, there was a way to actually preserve CDRs, that had started going bad. But I can't. It's been so long now, I can't remember the way to do it. But yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's stupid.
Well, one further thing I'd like to say on this is that it can't be that easy to determine how to handle this, only in the sense that, you've got CDs, you've got downloads, you've got vinyl. How much do you make of each? I mean, how many do you press of each? It should be, they really should know at the record company how much of a demand there is overall, and how much is selling of CDs and how much is selling of vinyl. Vinyl's another issue because, I keep hearing that vinyl is just growing and growing right now, and I see it. I see it firsthand at a job that I work at, where they don't carry any music. They never did, and all of a sudden they're carrying albums. They're carrying vinyl albums. And there's more and more of a push of that. I saw an article where over in the UK, vinyl last month or 2 months ago actually outsold CDs. But it didn't outsell downloads. So how much do you make of vinyl? How much do you make of CDs? And how much do you make available as downloads? It's not easy to determine how much. Well, downloads. There's no work in that.
No, right.
But hopefully McCartney's team and the record company knows how much it would sell. You make a limited quantity, so there's no loss. And if it just so happens that it outsells that quantity, you make more. So that's how I see this gets resolved. But I really don't like any of the people. Most people who buy Paul McCartney's albums are of an older demographic, as much as I hate to admit it. And those people do want physical product. They want to see a photo on the CD and the packaging. Maybe there's lyrics, something associated with the packaging of those songs as they came out from CD singles, something like that. People want that. That's also part of the appeal of vinyl. They want to see photos. They don't just want something that goes onto your hard drive and you press it onto CD. And to me, that's very impersonal. That's very cold. I want to hold something that I know what the artist looks like when I'm buying it. Maybe there's lyrics. All that matters, and certainly to all the first generation Beatles fans, that should matter. That's how we were brought up. If you don't mind doing the downloads, then fine. But I want something substantial more than that. I want it to be more of a personal experience when I buy this stuff.
Well, for all that money, it should be.
Well, the fact is, all that money, all that money has to do, I believe, with the production of these box sets as box sets, with the booklets and with the photos. And if it were just for 4 or 5 CDs, it would cost it would cost $50 or $60.
And why is Sony more willing to do a 36 CD Dylan set or a how many CDs was the Elvis set?
60.
Why? Yeah, 60. Why is Sony so much more willing to put out huge sets like that?
I don't know. But the thing is, if they're worried about it creeping up to the next price point, the fact is the price point isn't being governed by the number of CDs. It's being governed by the lavishness of the books. And I love the lavishness of the books. I'm happy to buy those sets. And, I don't think that adding another CD would make it that significantly more expensive. And as Ken pointed out, you could combine the demos onto one CD. I mean, I don't know. None of this makes sense to me, and it's being attributed to Paul, but I kind of don't think that he is sitting there saying, "No, I will not have it be more than 5 CDs." I mean, wasn't RAM 5 discs? I don't know.
I don't remember.
The deluxe
No,
set?
there were 4.
There were 4. You know what is the magical number of 4? In these reissues, what does that mean? Like who cares? You put out as many as you need to do the job. Right. And the job in this case includes a whole lot of B-sides and things that are now being just downloads. And I mean, I have mixed feelings about the downloads. Part of me doesn't care because I'm going to store them on a hard drive. I might burn a CD if I want to burn a CD. If I think my CD is going to go bad, I'll burn another one in 5 years. The hard drive can go bad. I mean, there is this question of whether there's any permanence in the stuff you're buying now. But as I say, that can happen with a factory press disc too. And the thing is, I guess maybe they're thinking, okay, if a person is buying this set and they're still going to get the packaging, they're still going to get all the pictures and all the stuff. It's just that they're going to get these extra, 18, whatever it is, number of tracks as downloads. And, okay, I just think that, it wouldn't have increased the price that much to do an extra disc. And it looks nicer and it makes it more of a complete set, I mean, it's the complete job is this is the reissue. It's in this box. Not it's in this box, but there's also some on my hard drive,
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And not only that, not everything that was a bonus track at that time is on this collection anyway, so it's not complete.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
Yeah.
Which always seems to happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
It always does.
Yeah. Indeed, because I remember that there was that Japanese version of Flowers in the Dirt, which I believe did have all of the stray tracks, and several of which are not on here.
Yeah.
In any form. So I guess we will we'll just we'll see what happens come March 24th.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So, in the meantime, we're gonna take a trip back in time to visit as I said, a relatively neglected album from the solo catalog, and it's George Harrison's "Somewhere in England," and I have in front of me the June-July 1981 issue of Beatle Fan Magazine. And we had in that issue three reviews of Somewhere in England. One by Bill King, who concludes his review by saying, "Listening to the Harrison of today, you may find it hard to believe that this is the same guitarist who once rocked out on such numbers as Roll Over Beethoven. But while his ties to rock now may be tenuous, Harrison proves on Somewhere in England that he still has a knack for putting together pleasing melodies and vocals." And there's another review by Sean Fulper Smith, who was a familiar name for people who were readers of Beatle Fan in the early days. And he says, despite the fact that Somewhere in England is pieced together from an abandoned project last year, it comes through as a cohesive set of songs that are both thought-provoking and musically superb. And then there's another review here. This one says, George Harrison did indeed give Warner's a more saleable product the second time around, but with this album's lyrical content, he creeps closer to becoming rock's ultimate BOF, boring old fart, and concludes, If you take the best moments from Harrison's last 3 albums, you have one great album. Unfortunately, when one releases an album only every 2 years or so, 4 or 5 good tracks just isn't enough. And those are the good parts of this review.
Who wrote that?
Who the hell wrote this?
We're never going to have him on the show.
Who the? Oh, wait a minute. That was me.
Oh.
And you should have seen the mail. In fact, in the next issue, for people who are lucky enough to have the two bound volumes of Beatle Fans' first 4 years, or who indeed have copies of those early years in the I guess it would be the August-September 81 issue, there are several letters that take issue with my review. So, I think it's probably time to take a kind of a more mature look at this album. And Ken, why don't you give us a little background first of all on Somewhere in England?
Well, it was the album that came out after John's death, but also when George put together this album, he had a different lineup of songs. He had 4 songs that didn't make the album because the record label, Warner Brothers, didn't feel that they were good enough.
Right.
And I think more people talk about those 4 songs than they talk about the actual album itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because those 4 songs are all very strong. In fact, the one song, Flying Hour, is a song that's been requested on my show. It's amongst the most requested, and certainly in my days on WDHA in New Jersey, because it has a lot of commercial appeal to it. And why on earth Warner Brothers would ever turn that song down, I will never know, because
I know, it's a fantastic song.
It could have made a good follow-up single from all those years ago, much more so, at least in my opinion, than Teardrops. But those other 4 songs have either been released commercially or they've come out through the Genesis books of George Harrison, the songs by George Harrison that came out. But, this was the album. A lot of people, kind of like with Tug of War, were waiting to hear what George had to say, his first album after John's death. And so he had to make these changes with the album. And, all those years ago proved to be a big hit, going to number 2 in America. But the album itself only went as high as number 11, I believe, on the Billboard charts. And it didn't have a long chart life. So the public really didn't take too well to the album. And beyond that, what more can I say about, the public and the way that they responded to this album?
Yeah. Now it should be added that that number 11 on Billboard's album chart. Now, for an album by a Beatle to get to number 11 would be a huge triumph. But at that time, a number 11 was considered to be a subpar performance.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Alan.
Especially considering that there was anticipation for anything from the ex-Beatles after John's death.
True.
Yeah.
So
I have a question for Ken.
Yeah.
Did Warner object to those 4 specific songs, or did they just think the album could be stronger? Because today as well, I was listening to the album plus those songs, and I found the 4 supposedly rejected songs to be among the strongest in the whole thing.
Yeah.
So did they really object to those specifically?
That was my understanding. I could be wrong on that, because Blood from a Clone, that song really does explain George's frustration with the record company right there.
Yeah.
And, all you got to do is read the lyrics of Blood from a Clone, and it does explain how the record company doesn't really know what they want. They really want more of the same thing, which is what Blood from a Clone is all about. Yeah. They don't want the changes in the music industry. They don't want new wave. Right. They don't play that crap and all that. So here was George, really. Those 4 songs that were left off of Somewhere in England were very similar to what he'd been doing anyway.
Yeah.
Flying Hour, which in fact was recorded in 78, could have easily have been on the George Harrison album of 79. So it was really more of the same. So I can understand George being very upset with Warner Brothers at the time because, there's always that prevailing attitude that the record company doesn't know what they're doing,
right?
And you either continue doing what has worked for you all along and stick to your guns, and that's really what George was doing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they don't like the material, then how can you complain about that when you're giving them something similar to what you've been doing anyway?
Right. I think Blood from a Clone was just a brilliant response to having his album rejected for the reasons they gave. It's like, oh, okay, here, how about this one? I'm amazed that they put that out because of it's basically standing up to them.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. That I'm amazed that the record company said, "Oh, this is much better," but I wrote an article for the last issue of Beatle Fan about George Harrison's 80s years, and of course looked into Somewhere in England, and I found an interview that George did with Cream in 1987, and that he told the interviewer about Somewhere in England that the company was telling me, well, we like it, but we don't really hear a single. And then other people were saying, now look, radio stations are having all these polls done in the street to find out what constitutes a hit single, and they've decided a hit single is a song of love gained or lost directed at 14 to 20-year-olds. And I said, shit, what chance does that give me?
Yeah. So, I don't know if this is an accurate source or not, but the review on All Music by Richard Janelle says that Warner Brothers specifically rejected the 4 songs.
Okay.
Which doesn't totally make sense to me that they would reject those 4 songs because they were great songs. My feeling is that my guess is that they rejected the album and he reworked them and then and added the 4 songs that he did. But I can't see them rejecting those 4 songs. I mean, the stupidity of that. I won't use any current comparisons, but I think there's a current comparison there. But in any event, but yeah, I mean that's just ridiculous. It just makes absolutely zero sense. But yeah, those are such great songs. Flying Hour. Lay His Head.
Lay His Head is a beautiful song.
And actually, they came out on bootleg before. They found the copy of the original tape and put it out on bootleg, first on vinyl and then on CD. So it was out there. They were out there before the Genesis and the iTunes reworkings.
I'm just saying commercially they came out that way.
Right.
Yeah, and even with the case of Lay His Head, the original version is different from what officially came out anyway. Lay His Head became the B-side of Got My Mind Set on You, and it was reworked by Jeff Lynne. I always loved that song.
Yeah.
Really gorgeous tune that is.
I agree.
And, there's a lot of hooks on all 4 of those songs. And I just to be realistic, I mean, music was changing in the late 70s to the point where a song like Blow Away, which to me, I think Blow Away should have been a number 1 hit.
Yeah.
Blow Away had all of that commercial appeal and went as high as number 16. So to be realistic, I'm not saying Flying Hour would have been a number 1 hit, but it probably would have made the top 40. So it would have given the album some legs. Oh, to me, it deserved to be much more than top 40. But I do think Flying Hour would have been a much better choice than anything else that was on the actual album.
Well, I mean, actually about the only good thing that I said in this review was actually about Teardrops, which I thought and still think, even listening to it just today, I don't understand why that was not a successful single, and it was hugely unsuccessful. I mean, I don't have the chart data in front of me, but I think, if I recall, I may not even have made the Billboard Hot 100.
I got to try and remember that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, if it did, it was very low, and yet I still think it's a very accessible commercial pop tune.
Yep. Absolutely. Another song that I thought was interesting, I looked this up on Spotify today, and and obviously the statistics have changed, but I found one of the more popular songs that was being streamed by, when you go to the George Harrison page, was Life Itself.
Yes.
And I think that song has aged very well.
Yeah.
I think that's one of his finest songs. I think it's just a beautiful expression of his spirituality. I'm not saying that would have been an enormous pop hit. Probably not.
No.
But I think it's definitely a standout. And as I said, I just find it interesting that song seems to be getting more and more, renewed attention as the years have gone on. And for me, that's always been a highlight of Somewhere in England.
And it's also interesting that there are 2 Hoagie Carmichael songs on the album.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I was watching To Have and Have Not a couple of months ago, and there in the middle of To Have and Have Not is Hoagie Carmichael singing Hong Kong Blues, the composer.
Yeah.
So that's. Who would have thought George Harrison was a Hoagie Carmichael fan? Although, he loved that kind of music.
Oh, sure.
Oh, yeah, it makes sense.
Music hall.
Right.
Yeah, well, you find out a lot of that stuff through the solo careers of the Beatles.
Yes.
Right.
Just the fact that George covered True Love, which was a Cole Porter song. And he also covered Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea. Which Cab Calloway had a hit with 1930, I think it was.
Yeah, everybody usually gives McCartney the depth on the on that kind of music, but George was there too, very much there.
Well, actually, both George and John were kind of closeted, British music hall fans.
Yeah.
George Formby. They were both big fans of George Formby.
Right. That's another. That's another name. And
how can you not say all 4 Beatles are?
Well, yeah,
that's right.
Ringo did Sentimental Journey.
Oh,
right.
Of course.
Yeah.
And Paul did his album of Standards, which he really should have done much earlier. For his love of free rock and roll. They all loved free rock and roll music, but you didn't really know it that much in the Beatles.
No, because at that time they really were giving the impression that they were unreconstructed rock and rollers.
Right.
And they didn't really give too much of a clue to their musical roots before Lonnie Donegan and Elvis Presley.
Well, it certainly showed with Paul's dance hall tunes, like when I'm 64 and Honey Pie.
Right.
Yep.
Until There Was You.
Oh, sure, exactly.
Yeah. But you're bringing up the Hoagie Carmichael songs. Baltimore Oriole is one of my favorite of all of George's recordings. I really love when he does cover other people's material. And in particular, the sax playing on that song is outstanding from Tom Scott. And also, the way he applies his slide guitar in a way that makes perfect sense on a George Harrison recording. It's his own arrangement of Baltimore Oriole, and I just think it's one of my favorite tracks on the album. And I love Hong Kong Blues too, but it makes you realize Baltimore Oriole, the way that George delivers it, it's such a beautiful song. And then there's the orchestration behind it too. All the work put behind that song I really, really loved.
I think I like Hong Kong Blues a little better, especially when you hear Hoagie Carmichael sing it in the movie. The clip's on YouTube if you don't want to sit through the whole movie, but I really like that. I really like that song. So.
Now I suspect that probably, well, maybe not Ken, but maybe the other the other 4 of us have probably listened to Somewhere in England at least a couple of times the last few days, sort of brushing up on it, and probably should get your thoughts. And why don't we? Well, actually, let me start with Ken and just get your overall thoughts on the album.
Well, the one thing that I think might be a bit shocking to the rest of you, since you know I'm a big solo fan here, is that Somewhere in England was the only George Harrison album, excluding electronic sound, that I was lukewarm to the first time that I heard it. I didn't really care. You know, it's a lot of the criticism that was directed towards George early on, being very preachy, being very spiritual, all that. I didn't take to, or maybe I just didn't like the songs as much when they first came out. But I've really grown to like this album a lot now. And it's funny, I have a listener of mine who listens to my live show of Every Little Thing, who was talking about, the fact that George is so consistently strong throughout his solo career, which I agree with. And by comparison, if you could do this with every single artist. You can list their best albums to their worst albums. And we've all seen online that people rate the Beatles albums from best to worst. And you usually get Beatles for Sale as the worst. Which, if that's the worst they ever did.
Yeah, really.
It makes you realize what an amazing catalog from start to finish the whole Beatles catalog is. Right. If I was to say Somewhere in England is my least favorite George Harrison album, that's still not a criticism because I love his entire body of work. But I've really grown to appreciate this album much more now than ever before because I've listened to it quite a lot in recent years, and certain songs that I dismissed back then, I like so much more now because I do like the spirituality in his songs. I like the messages in his songs. Writing on the Wall. Is actually one of my favorite songs of his because of what he's expressing in that song. And not only that, but the words flow so well poetically. That's what I love so much about that song. There's one of the verses goes, "Strange we hold on to things that have no grace or power, while death holds on to us much more with every passing hour. And all the time you thought it would last, your life, your friends would always be, till they're drunk away or shot away or die away from you." So it's all about the inevitability that we're all going to die, and everything that we experience in this life is really not all that important. It's all about going on this journey together and experiencing what we feel is important and hopefully getting to a higher plane in the end and reaching God. And also, you couldn't help but think about John Lennon there.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Once he said, shot away from you. But, George says so much of the same things in his songs, but uses a different angle, in the different songs. Like, between Writings on the Wall, also Unconsciousness Rules, those songs, That Which I Have Lost, it's really tackling similar subjects there. And if it doesn't bother you that George is trying to share his feelings and his experiences in life and what he feels is important in being spiritual and that everything else really isn't all that important, then these words are you hold them more dear to you. And you realize that, he's sharing his experiences about life with us. I mean, we don't have to agree with the way he sees his life, but this is him. This is who he really is and how he really feels. And the lyrics of those songs are very powerful, of those three songs that I mentioned. And, I just think this album is so much better than I first gave it credit for. And Blood from a Clone, I really enjoy because of what he's saying there about the record company. And he's not afraid to speak his mind. And he never was. That's part of the reason why we love him.
This is true.
So if I was to say this is my least favorite George Harrison album, which I don't even know if that's true. Almost every George Harrison album I've loved instantly. This one took a while to really appreciate. But I'm certainly glad that I appreciate it much more so now. Life itself, like you were all saying, beautiful sentiments there. It's, talking about God. How, God is everything to him. You are the one, you are my love, all that. So if you appreciate songs that mean something to George in what he's saying, and then on top of all that, his guitar playing is always great. I love the slide guitar work. I mentioned That Which I've Lost before. Really great guitar solo.
Great guitar work on that.
Yeah. That's one that I would pick as being one of my favorite guitar solos from him in his solo career. So there's a lot here to really appreciate on Somewhere in England, and I'm glad that I certainly feel so much better about the album now. So those are kind of my feelings about it.
Okay. Alan, now you mentioned that you were listening to the album this afternoon.
Right.
So what's your verdict? Your up-to-date verdict?
I listened to it twice today, in fact.
Yeah, so did I.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I kind of like the first version of the album better than I like the finished version of the album. I like Blood from a Clone just because of its attitude and its the certain hand gesture it represents of George responding to his record company. And there are things on it like, All Those Years Ago. Does anyone not like All Those Years Ago,
Right.
And Life Itself, also quite beautiful. And in fact, I think one of the versions of this album came with the demo of that, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
The
box set version came with Save the World.
Save the World.
Yeah.
Save the World. Okay.
Yeah.
Somewhere else on my drive here, I have a demo of Life Itself, which is really quite nice. And and Save the World is another one that I would want to mention, partly because that one still is current. No one was talking about global warming then, but also it has the first line is so typically George. Save the world, someone else might want to use it. And it gets a bit noisy, the arrangement. In fact, the arrangements of all these things get a bit noisy for me. I don't know, like too much instrumentation or something. Whereas the demo is quite lovely of that. And, in fact, there is another version, a remix, which came out in 1985 on a Greenpeace compilation charity CD, to raise money for Greenpeace, a version of Save the World that is roughly the same amount of time. It's both about 5 minutes, the one on the album and this one, but it's different in a lot of ways. It begins differently, and I think he's toned down some of the instrumentation a bit. All those sound effects are still in there and all that stuff, but, the wrecking of the world he's got going on halfway through the song. But somehow I like that version, the Greenpeace version, a bit better than the one on the album. I like Hoagie Carmichael songs, and I like him doing covers just because I'm interested in his take on other things, but I'm not crazy about these arrangements of these two. I kind of would have to say also it may be my least favorite George Harrison album. But that said, there are a lot of things to like on it, all the things I mentioned. And just looking again at the track list, the stuff that Ken said about how, this represents his life and what he's feeling and all that, that's obviously true, and it's an important point. You want to know George, you want to know what he's thinking, you got to listen to these songs. I just think musically, I almost feel, having heard a few demos from this album, I almost feel that I'd rather hear an album of the demos with just him playing an acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
His demos have a very special quality to them.
They do.
When it's just him and an acoustic guitar, there's nothing like it. Which is why I like Early Takes so much. And some of the bootlegs.
Yeah. And then again, if you would put those 4 other songs back on it, those songs kind of connect this album to the earlier work that he did. And I like that connection. They all have that certain George Harrison signature sound, the way the guitars sound, the way the slide guitar sounds, all that kind of thing. His particular kind of melodies, those all work, and they don't seem cluttered to me the way some of these other arrangements on this album do. So I have mixed feelings about it, but there are a lot of things I like, and that's it.
Incidentally, the demo you were talking about of Life Itself, the bootleg. There's a bootleg called Pirate Songs.
Right.
That has
Oh,
that.
yes.
That's where you can find it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it was compiled on, there was a 2-disc set that someone put out recently called Rarities, which has a lot of, his film mixes and single edits and a couple of demos and things. They've just collected a lot of the stuff that's been stray tracks on here and there. That's very handy. That must be what I listened to. Yeah.
In fact, I was surprised that when they put the reissue of Somewhere in England out, the Dark Horse Years box came out, and it has the cover on it is the original cover of Somewhere in England, but they didn't include those 4 rejected songs.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. Which was really kind of weird. I mean, I'm assuming they did that because, they have reissued the track, or they've issued the tracks on iTunes and stuff. But I mean, it doesn't make any sense not to do it.
Yeah, really. Steve, what's your take?
Well, I kind of like Alan. Every time I hear this album, I think back to the bootleg version because I really like that version a lot, and those 4 tracks are incredibly excellent. I mean, they really are. I did listen to it today, and you can't get away from not having all those years ago on there. I mean, that's
of course
it's a great song, and actually, it also had a kind of a mini Beatles reunion because Ringo's on drums and the McCartneys, Paul and Linda, are on backup vocals. So that's
Danny Lane is on there too.
Yeah, right. So that's kind of nice. I love the Hoagie Carmichael track, the tracks, the covers of those. There's a lot of good tracks here. I don't know if, as Ken said, listening to a George Harrison album is always listening to him, speak through his lyrics as he did. So I mean that's part of it too. I like this album. I'm a George Harrison. I think George's stuff, is very strong all the way through, even on his weak albums. I mean, Ken, you said you're not sure. This is probably one of his weaker albums. I think electronic music and Wonderwall are probably closer to the ones I really don't like. This is not one of those I really don't like. There's a lot of reasons to like this. I do wish, because I was listening to the box set version today, I really wish they had put why they stuck the demo of Save the World and not put those other tracks on there. I don't get that. I don't get that at all. But it's nice that they did that. But you have to look, and in my view, you have to look at the original version and the second version side by side, and kind of make a playlist out of them, which actually I did today on my phone. And all the songs are great. It's a good album. It may not be his strongest album. It's not All Things Must Pass, but it's a good album. I think Blood from a Clone is great. Because of the little stab at the record company. Unconsciousness Rules, for some reason I really like that. I don't know, there's so many good things about this album. Save the World is a great song. I mean, it's a good album all the way through. I really like it. I just wish that they had gone with the original version and not made him redo it, although we never would have probably gotten all those years ago out of it. But it's a good album. I think it's a good album. It's George's albums rarely fail with me, and this one doesn't. So
yeah. By the way, I don't want you to misunderstand when I said the weakest album, because even his weakest album is still very good.
Yeah.
George was consistently strong throughout his solo career.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, I mean, I agree there, and that's what I was basically saying, that all his albums are good. I mean, some of them are better than others, but and this one is good. I don't know if the mix is fantastic, but it's still good. There, even with the remix, or the remaster, which is what I was listening to today. It's a great album. It's a great album.
Well, one thing about George's solo stuff, I think, is that certainly from the ones on his Dark Horse label, I think that they were produced extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel that way, and it shows in the remastering. It's great sound coming out of all those.
I don't know
albums.
that the remastered sound on this one was all that great. It didn't knock me over like some remasters I've heard. Even some of the tracks on Pure McCartney sounded better to me than this did. But I don't know. But still, I mean, overall, it's a good album. The other thing that's curious is that they used the original cover on the box set remaster, which is strange, because why
use the original cover and not have the 4 tracks?
Well, why use the original cover at all? I mean, why not use the cover that they actually released it? That doesn't make sense either. Right. So there were a couple things about the reissue that I didn't particularly care for, but I mean, overall, it's a good album. So
there was one other thing. It's interesting to note that all those years ago, and we all loved the song and we loved the sentiment and the words are just wonderful.
Of course.
But all those years ago, originally was not even written for this purpose.
Right.
Of course. Right.
All those years ago had a completely different set of lyrics, and it was a song that George was offering to Ringo, which he was going to use on an album which was first going to be called Can't Fight Lightning, which became Stop and Smell the Roses. So he reworked that song to put these lyrics in. So still a tremendous tribute song.
Right, but the only reason why it is a 3/4 reunion, or not a 3/4, it's the reunion of the 3 surviving Beatles, is because they're using Ringo's drum track from the original iteration of the track.
Right.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
They didn't go back in and redo this together?
Nope.
Okay. All right.
No, it was Ringo's original drum track, and he just had Paul and Linda and Denny come to Friar Park, and then they laid down their backing vocals.
Okay.
Now, Kit, I imagine you probably have been exploring somewhere in England more recently than perhaps Alan and Steve and me, because you were doing your research for your splendid article on George's 80s rejuvenation of his career, which as you've mentioned, actually you got the impetus for on one of your early appearances here.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. It was, we had such a great conversation about it that it sparked the idea to look at his whole career, and it's amazing how much he really did in the 80s. I mean, there was so much to cover, because people tended to think after between Gone Troppo and Cloud 9 that he didn't do that much. Not true. And so it was really interesting to see that. But somewhere in England, this was interesting, because as you said, I was revisiting this for this article as well. And I'll tell you, I went through kind of a personal transformation with this album, because the first time I heard it, this was many years ago, and I did not know the background. I mean, I knew, of course, it had been, released after John Lennon's death, but I didn't know the whole story about how he, the first version was rejected by the record company and all. So I remember listening to that album for the first time, and and it starts right off with "Blood from a Clone," and I thought, "What the hell is this?" I mean, it was so angry, and I just, that really set the tone for me for the rest of the album, and I just thought, oh, what a negative, this whole album was just full of negativity, and well, of course, as I got older and wiser, and I learned the whole story, I think this is a case where when you know the background of the album, it really enhances your appreciation of it. Because once I learned all that, I thought, oh, okay, now I see what he was doing from Blood from a Clone. And as many of you have said, I mean, it's actually pretty clever. I mean, the lyrics are so biting, and then when you think of something like Writings on the Wall, I mean, it takes on such, it takes on a great deal of meaning when you understand the circumstances. And so today, I really, I'm not saying this is one of my favorite albums of his. I mean, as Steve said, it's not All Things Must Pass. For me, it's not 33 1/3. It's not Cloud 9. But it's a bit uneven, but there are some great moments on there, and so many, many of you have already touched on them. As I mentioned earlier, Life Itself, Writings on the Wall. I also want to say there are two, I think, MVPs on this album, and one Ken already mentioned, Tom Scott. Tom Scott was also, I thought his solo on Consciousness Rules was terrific, in addition to George's solo. And also Willie Weeks. I thought his based on That Which I Have Lost, great stuff. Right? So, George was fortunate enough that he was able to surround himself with the best of the best. And those are two, Tom Scott and Willie Weeks were definitely examples of that. Yeah, I mean, so I think they were MVPs as well on the album. Alan, as you were giving your assessment, I've had sort of an epiphany because you mentioned the Hoagie Carmichael covers, and I never quite connected to them, and I always wondered why. And when you said overarranged, I thought that's it. You nailed it. Because I love his covers. I mean, George has done a number of covers, but I agree that the arrangements on them were just too busy. Yeah. And I think that's why I never quite connected to them. They're great songs. He sings them well. I mean, obviously they're great songs for Hoagie Carmichael, but yeah, I think the arrangement could have been a little more sparse, something to let those wonderful lyrics really shine through. So thank you for clarifying that for me.
Anytime.
Because I always thought, why do I not like this as much as I should? But Save the World, there's been a little discussion of that. I mean, that is such an interesting song because you think, just by the title, you think, oh, this is going to be this, this optimistic, let's go out and change the world. And it's not quite like that. Singing, we're at the mercy of so few with evil hearts determined to reduce this planet to hell. Yeah, let's go save it. I mean, it's he's very honest. Let's put it that way. But it fits in with the other songs that, Ken, you have mentioned, that about his belief in God, that his spirituality will, that spirituality will get us through. That's his expression. And so it does sort of fit in with the other, like Writings on the Wall or Life Itself, or and so I now have a lot more appreciation for the album. Oh, and I forgot to mention Teardrops. I agree, Al, that was a highlight too. That's a great song, and probably one of the more accessible ones, for sure. And of course, all those years ago, outstanding. And so I think that perhaps it's an album, and maybe this is why it didn't do as well. I think it was the first album of his not to go gold in America. I think I mentioned that in my article. And perhaps because this does merit repeated listenings. I don't think this is an album that you immediately connect with. No. I think because there are some songs on here that are so rich in meaning that you do have to listen to them a few times to quotes get it. And as I said, knowing the background, but of course when it came out in '81, that wasn't not everybody knew the full background. So
right.
But so I think that might be it. That maybe some of it just wasn't as immediately accessible as some of perhaps his past work was. So even though it was as I mentioned, a little uneven, it's still definitely, I like it it's one of the albums. I guess I'd put it further down the list of the albums I like of his, but not too much further down the list. I mean, as you said, electronic sounds, all that. I didn't connect.
However, yeah. I do love Wonderwall music, so there I disagree with Steve. But
you like it? Do you like Wonderwall music better than this?
I find it very interesting because there's a lot more of his Indian music right there, and you only got a taste of that in the Beatles through a few songs. Right. So if you wanted George to dabble more in that, you got it right there. And George never put out an all-Indian album. He would produce Ravi Shankar, but he would never do all-Indian music himself. So for that, I find Wonderwall music very interesting. And it's not all Indian music, obviously.
No.
But I do find it very interesting as scoring music, and also I love the arrangements of the songs, whether it all comes down to the Indian musicians and what they came up with. However it was done, it's a very interesting album.
I can't put Wonderwall ahead of this. Under no.
I don't know if I'm putting it ahead of it, but like Kit said, there are certain albums that take a while to grow on you, and Somewhere in England is one of those albums.
Definitely.
And like what I've said about Living in the Material World, which is my favorite album, a lot of people probably they need to listen to that a lot before they get the messages in George's songs. They're not every song is What Is Life and Got My Mind Set on You and very instant, catchy songs of George's. The ones that are more spiritual and more philosophical, you got to take the time and listen to what he's saying and listen several times over before you can appreciate it.
Absolutely.
True.
Somewhere in England is one of those albums for me.
Yep. And especially, back then when we were, a lot younger, songs like Writings on the Wall and from the Beatles years, Within You, Without You, songs like that, we tended to not really understand them or feel that they were the answers at the end. Another one felt that they were quote unquote preachy.
Right.
Well, you get to a more mature age, and you can actually really appreciate the sentiments in those songs.
You can relate much more to what George is saying as you get older.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Certainly, when you think about what he was saying in Within You, Without You, how deep a message that is. and if you're a teenager listening to that, that's going to go over your head.
Oh, absolutely. That was the one track on Sgt. Pepper, and we always thought that the little titter of laughter that's at the end there, was put there specifically because it was such a boring song, that sort of thing.
Right.
It's it's just a matter of growing into. I think we probably had to grow into a lot of George's music. As a matter of fact, Kit, you'll get a kick out of this. I got to give you one more quote from my review of Somewhere in England from Beatle Fan in 1981.
Yeah.
Speaking of chaff, blood from a clone is a spiteful, narrow-minded attack on Warner's, the record industry, and you and me, for wanting something more than the same old cliches and tired arrangements. It's beneath a man who preaches about love of God and wanting to save the world to stoop to cheap mudslinging like this.
Huh.
Now, see,
what do you think of that?
Yeah, well, you know what, though? That's sort of what I initially thought, when I first heard this album. I mean, seriously, maybe not all of that, but some of it, that I thought, what, wait a minute, this is My Sweet Lord, What Is Life? What is that? This is just pure anger and spite and all that. And I think that was my initial reaction too. And I think that colored my perception of initially of the rest of the album. So we laugh, but that was kind of my reaction when I first heard it.
Perhaps not that extreme, but
not that extreme, but yeah, but I kind of thought the same thing. Like, how dare he put how could he put this negativity on this album?
Yeah. So very true.
Yeah.
Most fans actually, when it comes to George's solo career, especially the mainstream fans, they tend to like the more commercial,
right,
the more upbeat. Something like All Things Must Pass, while it was very spiritual on many of the songs, or like Kit mentioned, 33 and a Third, a lot of lightheartedness in there, poking fun at My Sweet Lord in this song, and Cracker Box Palace, or something like Cloud Nine. The general public, the mainstream audience, tends to gravitate to that stuff more, and I think the more loyal hardcore, if you want to call them, of George's fans understands the full scope of his music and what he was saying, and likes the more in-depth songs, like the ones on Living in the Material World, or this one, Somewhere in England.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, one day you just wake up and you think, I get it now.
Yeah.
You're older, like, I get what he was saying now,
Well, I should own up briefly, because we're running out of time, but I should own up to my current thoughts on this album, as opposed to this screed from 1981. And basically, it's very similar to most of your thoughts. It's not in. I would say it's not in the my personal pantheon of the, let's say, the single disc George Harrison album. So it's not up there with 33 and a Third or Cloud Nine or Brainwashed, or perhaps even Living in the Material World. But it certainly has, it's certainly aged much better than I had expected, for much the same reason that I spoke of just before, that a lot of those songs that we considered to be preachy at that time, one can relate much easier to them, with a more mature viewpoint. And actually, Blood from a Clone turned out to be kind of very prescient, because one could very easily say that of course, the music business has always been somewhat in that vein, but certainly in the 36 years since this album came out, that's been pretty much the hallmark of the business, has been just been, chasing one, whatever the trend of the moment is. That's what they want. And so, to a great degree, it's kind of a prescient tune, but it's overall.
I think it's kind of always been that way. There's always been a lot of formula out there. Record companies, once an artist puts out a hit record that sounds a certain way, they want another one to follow that's close to it.
Oh, sure.
It's always been like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you can go back to the earliest days of rock and roll, or even before, but certainly from the 80s beyond, where the business became much more corporate, it's really been just out of hand, where they've just simply been chasing whatever the flavor of the moment is, that sort of thing. But overall, it's a nice, it's a very pleasant album. But again, I would say, I think we're pretty much unanimous in saying that it's not one that we would put in the pantheon of Harrison albums.
No.
Probably not.
Yeah.
No.
Absolutely. But certainly one that's that's aged fairly well. So I think the clock has pretty much got us again. So I think it's time to wrap it up. And Steve, why don't you let us know how you can contact us?
You can download our shows at BeatlesExaminer.podbean.com, or on YouTube. We have actually two there's two places on YouTube. We have a Things We Said Today page, and we also and I also put the shows on my page. And if you search Things We Said Today Beatles Radio, you'll find them. You can contact us by writing Things We Said Today Radio Show at gmail.com. You can we also have individual Facebook pages where you can talk to us. The show has a Facebook page of its own, Things We Said Today Beatles Radio Fans. And you can find us there. You can leave comments. You can complain. You can do whatever you want. And we will very likely respond to you because we are good people and we like people to write to us and we like to write back. Mm-hmm. There you go.
And Alan, how do people contact you?
Oh, probably by Facebook, either under Alan Kozin or Alan Kozin Remix. It's probably the best way.
Mm-hmm. With me, it's very similar. Facebook, Al Sussman, Twitter, at ASUSS49, or through Beatle Fan Magazine, www.beatlefan.com, or www.paradingpress.com for Changing Times, 101 Days That Shaped a Generation. Kit, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, you can look me up on my website, kidotool.com. You can find me on Facebook under my name, and on Twitter at Kid O'Toole, all one word. And I should also mention that by the time probably this will be released or a couple of days after, my Deep Beatles column is returning to Something Else Reviews this weekend. I had to go on a longer hiatus than I had planned, but it's coming this weekend. So check it out.
And you will also have, well, actually, again, by the time this drops, it probably will be archived, but you have a Facebook Live event coming up this Wednesday evening.
That's right, at 6:30 Eastern. So if you missed it, if you've heard the show and you've missed it, just check out my Facebook page and it'll be archived there.
Mm-hmm. And Ken, what's going on with your website and with Every Little Thing?
Well, first of all, you can reach me on my Facebook page at Ken Michaels, and I also have an email address at everylittlething@att.net. My website, which is kenmichaelsradio.com, features interviews with everybody on this panel right now. So if you want to hear interviews with any of us, me talking to Al or Steve or Alan or Kit, it's all there on the website on my interview pages. There's also a Beatles trivia and games page where you can win one of 9 prizes every single week. They're all tremendous prizes. One of them happens to be Kit's book, Songs He Were Singing. And not only that, this is going to make everybody run to my website. Mm-hmm. You could also win, along with Kit's book, a Kid O'Toole tote bag.
Mm-hmm. Ooh,
so
yes,
that goes along with that. Mm-hmm. And I also should mention that for anyone that wants to hear my radio show, Every Little Thing, and they don't want to have to listen at a specific time to any of the radio stations that carry it, there's a website called globaltexandchronicles.com where you can stream many of my archive shows there whenever you want. And there's almost always one that gets posted every single week. So again, that's globaltexandchronicles.com. My newest show is an hour of soundtrack music, group and solo, which is going to be on a lot of radio stations this coming week, and soon to be on Global Tex and Chronicles. So that's about it.
Okay.
Al, can I add my forgot my email address, BeatlesExaminer@gmail.com. And like I have a Facebook page and also a Beatles news group, Beatles News and Commentary on Facebook that you're welcome to join. So
right. And I think you've also got, don't you also have a separate one where you do non-Beatles discussion?
Do I?
Oh, I thought you had a separate one.
I do so well. I have several blogs, but I'm not going to take the time and
okay.
I do have a Beatles blog, Beatles News Insider, that I do every so often, which will pop up on my Facebook page and on Beatles News and Commentary. So.
I see. Okay, that's great. All righty. Well, as I said, the clock has got us again. We had 2 items to cover, and as usual, we went way over time. But anyway, it's been a fascinating show as always. Kit, thanks once again for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm sure we'll have you back very, very soon.
Sounds good.
And for Kit O'Toole and Steve Marinucci and Alan Cozen and Ken Michaels, this is Al Sussman, and thank you for listening to Things We Said Today, and we will see you next time.